Hello, welcome to another Facebook Live Lunch and Learn with the Center for African American Health. My name is Eric Moore. I'm the Research and Evaluation Coordinator, and I also overseeing these 2020 census activities for our organization. For those who are not familiar with the Center for African American Health, we are committed to improving the health and well-being of African American community by offering community-based, evidence-based disease prevention and disease management programs, events, and services. Today on Facebook Live, we want to encourage everybody to put their questions into the chat box below, and we'll address them if time permits. So today, as we hear more from communities about the country, around the country with a call to defund police, we need to discuss how billions of dollars of funding are actually allocated on a federal level, and that's why the 2020 census is so important to our community. Over the next decade, lawmakers, business makers, and business owners and many others will use 2020 census data to make critical decisions. The results will show how where communities need schools, new clinics, new roads, and more services for families, older adults, and children. The results will also inform how hundreds of billions of dollars in federal funding are allocated to more than 100 programs, including Medicaid, Head Start, block grants for community mental health services, and the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP. Our guest today is Adam Bickford, Outreach Coordinator for the Colorado State Demographer's Office within the Department of Local Affairs. I want to say first, the Center couldn't have done this work without the generosity from the Department of Local Affairs, who awarded us with a grant to help educate African Americans around the importance of being counted and participating in the census. Before we go into Adam's piece, I do want to give an overview of the census. So we just want to talk a little bit about some key parts. So what is the census? The census is an address-based questionnaire conducted every 10 years by the U.S. Census Bureau. This is within the U.S. Department of Commerce, and it's to accomplish two of its original goals from when it first started in 1790. That is to count everyone in the United States and to determine political representation in Congress. The benefits of the census are invaluable and impacts everyone in three clear ways: through dollars, decision-making, and representation, both through people and politics. It is mandated by law that everybody participates in completing the census, and its origins are found in our U.S. Constitution of Article 1, Section 2. So how can you complete it? The U.S. Census can be completed in four ways: paper questionnaire, by phone, online, and in person via the census-hired door knockers, also known as enumerators. One note is that the door-to-door operations have been impacted by COVID-19, and we'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for Colorado. And we encourage folks to use any of the first three methods to complete the census. This will help prevent you from getting any visits at the door to complete it. The 2020 census is a special one because it's the first time that you can actually submit it online. And we encourage folks to use that method because it is the quickest and the most convenient. The nice thing about the online version is that there's 13 languages available that you can actually take on the online version. And also through the census website, there's 59 non-English language guides that are available. So it does cover a variety of different languages. Those 13 languages, according to the census, covers over 90% of the languages spoken in U.S. households. So that will cover most folks, but feel free. There's a lot of opportunities to reach out to your community for assistance when it comes to translation. The paper surveys and the paper questionnaires and the letter invites that were sent back out during the week of March 12th when the census opened up. And a lot of folks might have gotten it. Most would, but in the invite letter, there's a 12-digit ID number that's used to tie your responses to your physical address. So one thing to keep in mind is that if you don't have that paper or if you don't have the ID available, that's fine. You can still go online and take it without the ID. The way it would work is you would just type in your physical address. So taking it, no big deal. How long does it take? Well, the census is really only 10 questions. It takes less than 10 minutes to complete. Some of these questions you can expect are kind of the general demographics, which are age, sex, race, ethnicity. It also asks about things such as how many people are living in your household and what is the head of household's relationship to those members. One thing to know is that the Census Bureau will not ask for any banking information. No payments, donations. They won't ask for your immigration or citizenship status or religious or political affiliation. So keep in mind that these are things they're not going to ask for normally, and there is a fraud that is out and about when it comes to these kind of activities. So just be on alert, and there are ways that you can report it to the U.S. Census through their website. As far as how long it takes, personally for me, I did a demonstration actually. We had a last Facebook Live webinar with another DOLA representative, Parker Crow, back on May 1st. And I did I pretended to do a submission of a questionnaire where I reported myself and an imaginary spouse, and it took less than 5 minutes to complete. So one other question is, who should you include in the census? So in your household, it's really everyone, whether they're relatives or not related at all to you. If they live or sleep most of the time in your household as of April 1st of this year, make sure you count them. This makes sure that everybody's counted and that the U.S. Bureau has great descriptions online about who is eligible and who to include. This includes roommates as well. There's also, the Census Bureau also has many ways to deduplicate, that is to remove any multiple submissions for the same persons on the back end. So if, for example, if you have a child who you reported in your household, but they also lived in a college room dorm setting, there's a way that they can make sure that they're not gonna be counted twice. So make sure that you still count those who are still spending most of the time in your house. When it comes to including people, the important thing is that, is to make sure that we're doing it in a sense to really get a complete count. We have a term, it's called hard to count populations or communities. And these are really the ones who are not likely to respond and are historically not counted, usually due to societal environment and also changes to the census questions themselves. A good example of societal environment would be around the current administration's push to include a citizenship question. Thankfully, it's not something that's actually included. It did not make it on the survey, but it is something that we have to keep in mind that influences whether people or not take it out of fear of retaliation, for example, when it comes to immigrant and refugee populations. Usually when it comes to those who are hard to count, it's because they're hard to locate, they're hard to contact, persuade, or interview. I'll give some examples of these communities. So really racial and ethnic communities, generally mean out of historic mistrust for government entities. When we look at those who are experiencing homelessness or part of the transient populations, those again in immigrant and refugees communities. Young children are surprisingly left off a lot. We'll talk a little bit more about that too. But census research shows that there's a lot of factors that go into that. If a child is newborn, if they're split between households, if they live in a multi-generational or single parent household, they have a lot of relocation in their history, moving place to place. They are a lot of times for that reason not counted. And in fact, back at the last census in 2010, there's an estimated 16,000 children who are not counted in Colorado, and about 1% or 1 million or 5% of children in the U.S. total that were not counted. So that's a lot of money, and we'll talk a little bit about how that really impacts you when you're not counted. Other groups include language and those who have low English literacy, those living in rural areas that are hard to reach, and again, multi-generational households. When it comes to how secure the census is, particularly when people think about the online component, there's some things we want to cover. So, well, first off, the information that the census collects and stores and actually releases as well and reporting is protected through their practices and by law. The census doesn't share any individual information to other government entities, any individual information to government entities. So that includes not the FBI, CIA, Department of Homeland Security, ICE, which is an agency within the Department of Homeland Security. They won't share any of the information with those entities. They won't share it with your employer, with your bank, with your landlord. So issues around whether you want to give information that you feel might get out to those entities, you don't have to worry about. The census implements some different internal data processes to make sure that they can anonymize or hide your identity before they share out externally with the data. This is done really with making sure that before they release the data, they de-identify, so they take your name and location out of that, so no one can find a specific issue, and they aggregate you or group you together so that when they release it, it's really just showing up in different geographical locations such as census tracts. And that really helps make sure that you don't have to worry about personal disclosure. With the online component, there are cybersecurity measures that are taking place to make sure that they can secure data collection, transmission, and monitoring of the storage sites. So that's something that they've been really stressing about, making sure people understand that online, there's a lot of concern when it comes to privacy. So they've taken a lot of precautions to make sure that's not an issue for this first time of trying it online. In addition to the census's practices, and also an employee oath that they take to protect the information, U.S. law does support their work. There's two specific U.S. code laws that I like to cite. Title 44, which was passed in 1952, mandates that your individual data is protected for 72 years, in which then it will be released and available on the National Archive. In that case, that's really where, kind of a fun fact is that that's where we get our ancestral information about elder family members or other ancestors in the U.S. But for 72 years, you don't have to worry about that being something that is available to folks. Also, Title 13, which was passed in 1954, protects individual information being shared outside of the Bureau to other government agencies, like I mentioned. And it also has a provision to make sure that any violations of that will lead to up to 5 years of imprisonment and fines up to $250,000. So I just wanted to kind of just go over that a little bit. Really, we're going to move into Adam. Adam's going to be able to talk a lot more about really the update around the 2020 census here in Colorado. So Adam, I just want to say again, thank you for joining us. Feel free, we want to make sure that you have some time to go through your slides. And we're all very interested really particularly about how COVID-19 has impacted the 2020 census.
Great, thank you, Eric. If you could start up the slide deck, that would be great.
All right, let me get that started here.
In the meantime, thank you again, everyone. We're in the middle of a particularly unique census period. Here we go. There we go. Thank you. Can we go to the next slide, please? This is basically what we're going to be talking about, some of the revised census operations, talk a little bit about the response rate as of yesterday, and then re-emphasize some of the things that Eric was talking about in terms of local funding, why the census data matters, and how we're dealing with COVID-19 restrictions, and finally talk a little bit about a big promotional event that is happening next week. Please. So as we work through things, you will see these logos. The top one is the Colorado Census logo. The bottom one is the official Census 2020 logo. When you are looking at materials, we encourage people to look for those logos to help tell that the information or the materials that you receive are legitimate. All of our materials are co-branded with these various logos, and it helps to guarantee that the information that you get is going to be accurate and correct. Next one, please. So we say that every census has its challenges, and this time they've been unique. We've had 2 months of delays due to COVID-19, and things have just now started getting back on track. There was a final postcard sent on May 9th. We've heard that there will be another postcard sent to non-responding homes in July. Additionally, field operations delivering of census packets to rural addresses that do not have a regular street address has resumed, and it's fairly complete. It's almost complete now. Those households that do not respond to the update leave process will receive another reminder in the middle of this month. The self-response period continues through October, and then in August we begin what is called the non-response follow-up process, which will send enumerators out to non-responding households throughout the state. This activity is the most expensive activity that the census completes, and we encourage people to complete submit their census forms as soon as they can to, self-respond in order to ease the burden that the Census Bureau has to counting everyone. And the Census Bureau is tasked with counting everyone. So you decide that someone decides they're not going to submit the census for whatever reason, they're still going to get counted because that is the constitutional requirement.
Mhm.
We will return. Next slide, please. Additional things that have been going on. There's a group quarters count. These are for people who are in dorms and prisons and other group settings and nursing homes. That's continuing, and that will continue into the end of September. And then there is a plan for a homeless count. Originally, this count was planned for late March, but has been postponed. They're counting individuals who, where they receive services. So if you receive services from a soup kitchen or a meal program, people experiencing homelessness will be counted there. That is under review right now, and we're not quite sure when that is going to start up again, but that will begin again. And then another question that we have is about the overall reporting deadline. By law, the Census Bureau is supposed to report out the top line results, which is the count of persons by state, at the end of this year. And there's some discussion now about whether delaying that reporting is going to be possible due to the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic. These discussions are still going on. We haven't heard anything yet about delaying those deadlines. So, just stay tuned. Let's see how things are going. Next slide.
I know we're all kind of just on hinge. Okay, so what has been the response rate in Colorado so far?
Well, we are a little bit behind where we were in 2010. Current response rate as of yesterday was 63.4%. You see on this chart, it puts us on the 18th of all states. You can see Minnesota has got 70.5%, and then there we are, 63.4%. Response rates have been going up about 0.1% a day since the middle of May, or the beginning of May, actually. So it's been going slowly. We want to try to reach the 27.2% response rate that we had in 2010, and we would like to exceed it. And now, given that people have until Halloween to complete the census, we have a relatively good chance of meeting that goal. But just because you have until Halloween doesn't mean that you should actually wait until Halloween. I would really want to encourage people who have got this information, who have the census forms, who have their ID letters, or who know where the website link is, and know what the telephone number is, to complete the census now, so that it will take some of the burden off of the enumerators. Next.
Yeah. And Adam, how's the response rate in Denver and across the metro area?
Well, there's a couple of things I want to talk about here. First of all, when we talk about census geography, we talk about a census tract, which is a grouping of about 5,000 people. Across the state, 60% of our census tracts have response rates above 60%. As you can see on this map, first of all, the overall response rate for the city and county of Denver is 63.2, and you can see that many of the census tracts on this map are above 57 and 60%. The areas that are not are areas such as the census tract immediately west of Montbello, for one. And then the second area that is largely in brown is the Swansea, Globeville area, and also the West Colfax area. So those are areas where people have not responded at a level equal to the rest of the city. And those are areas, when you think about the concentration of the individuals who live on that area, in those areas, these are areas where people will benefit from additional federal funding for programs. So that's an important thing to consider. And the question then is, given that we assume that most everybody is aware that census is going on, we need to understand why people are not responding.
Okay. And I know you have another slide here.
So this is Aurora. The boundaries of Aurora are not as clear-cut as they are for Denver. So you have all these holes and open spaces. But what you see here is, first of all, 2/3 of the people living in the city of Aurora have responded, which is great. And that puts them in the 55 out of 270 municipalities. The areas where there has not been a great, high level of response are in sort of the north central areas of Aurora, and also this one eastern area. Of course, Aurora it straddles 3 different counties, and the outreach effort is a little bit more difficult here. But you can see where there are areas where additional outreach can be helpful. Certainly, these areas, especially along Colfax, are also hard to count areas, and they're places where, as outreach begins to resume, there are opportunities to improve responses.
Yeah. And I love that you're emphasizing that we need to really think about what are the areas, where are our gaps? And there's a lot of online tools that are available for folks to understand where response rates are coming in geographically. So I think that's a great point you made. I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the importance of the census. So I don't know if you can give us some more information about how we tax folks here at the local level.
Okay, so the census funds the entire range of federal programs, and based on 2016 fiscal year 2016, that was about $13 billion dollars that went to Colorado from these programs. The value has gone up as the information for 2017 has come through, but we expect that the amount of federal funds that Coloradans get ranges between $2,300 per person to over $3,000 per person. And it's the entire range of programs here that get funded. This is really important, to help make sure that students get fed. That especially now knowing that schools cannot rely on having a student population in their school buildings that they can get meals to. It's very important that programs get funded completely, thoroughly, and that benefits go out to people based upon the population in particular areas. Another point I want to make is that Colorado is a net donor state. We send more tax dollars to the federal government than we receive in benefits, monetary benefits. And that is mostly because we're young, but it's also a function of the size of the population that gets recorded in the decennial census. So it's an important piece to underscore to people that there actually are direct economic benefits that individuals and then individual communities will receive by submitting information on your census form.
Wow, that's one thing that resonates with me when I talk to folks about the benefits of this. To think that you could be losing out on $2,300 to $3,000 per person per year for 10 years. That's an amazing amount of money that you're losing every decade when you're not counted. And I think that's one of those big emphases, that everybody's impacted. If you ride on the roads, transportation, use public services, even if there's things you feel like don't apply, they will impact you, your family, or community in some way. And I feel like that's one of those messages that a lot of folks need to hear so that they understand the benefits that come from this. Is this something that is reoccurring? So, just want to talk a little bit about why, the census data really, matters.
Well, this data gets used by state and local governments and by businesses every day. We use this information to help with planning. We help with program evaluations. My office resets all of its population projections based on the decennial census results. And that's one of the things that we will be doing once we start receiving the results in 2021. It's very, very important that this information be correct so that communities are represented properly, that they receive the benefits that they are entitled to, and that people's needs are accurately represented. Without a complete information from the census collection, we as the state demography office is stuck. So I sometimes when I talk to people, I say, well, just do it for me, make my life easier, make sure that everything is correct. I think I can show you the next slide, because there's also something very essential to the American project here.
Yes, that's perfect. Yeah, let's. I would love to talk about political representation and how it's affected.
Yeah. So our legacy as a nation is representative government, and the representation of states in the House of Representatives is determined by the census. You can see on this map that projections suggest that Colorado is about to gain a House seat. But this is based on the projections. The actual redistricting and reapportionment of House seats depends upon the actual counts. So if these counts are inaccurate, if they are lower than they should be, we may not get the representation that we are entitled to, as Coloradans. Also, once this information is collected and distributed to states redistrict, change their political boundaries within cities and within counties and areas. Again, if there are distortions in that data, if it isn't accurate, people will not get represented in the way that they should.
Yeah, that was a good point.
And this is our legacy. No matter what you think about how governments work on a day-to-day basis, we still have a governance that is built upon this idea that every individual has representation and deserves representation. And if people are not responding in a way, they're telling the government that they don't need to be represented. And I'm very concerned about making sure that we have the representation that we need, and more importantly, that we have an accurate representation about who is living in Colorado.
Yeah.
Colorado is full of awesome communities. I've been lucky to hang out and visit a lot of them. And every time I talk to people, I want to make sure that their views, their identities are represented in the stats that we produce. And this is the way that we do this, by getting people to respond to the census.
And the census provides a great way for us to do that. A lot of folks are worried about how COVID-19 has impacted. Can you tell us a little bit more about some of the things that affected here in Colorado?
Yeah, well, we've had this 2-month delay, first of all, and addresses have been changed. Now, a lot of outreach efforts that DOLA has supported and my office has supported were planned around having large events where people would sign up, having census parties and such. Now, as we're reopening, it's going to be a little bit more complicated to have these events, but these events can start up now. And as you're starting to think about how you're going to go out and reach out to your community, how you're going to get out and talk to people and hand them a tablet and get them to respond online, you need to take into account the fact that we are still under a pandemic, and that people need to be safe by wearing masks, by maintaining safe distances, by practicing good hygiene. And we encourage everyone to take this opportunity as an event to innovate and to find new ways of reaching out to individuals who rent, individuals who, speak different languages, individuals who may not be citizens but are residents, and to get them to respond to this. We have, links here to the Safer at Home guidelines. Certainly, pay attention to those. We don't want anyone to get sick, but we also want to make sure that people get counted.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adam, we are at 12:30. I just want to do this last slide to mention you guys are have a week dedicated to the census. So if you want to talk about that.
Well, this is sort of our last bit. We're holding the Census Awareness Week. It goes from Flag Day to Father's Day, and in there we are. The Census Bureau is sponsoring the Denver Juneteenth Music Festival. They're participating in the various Pride events. They're participating in World Refugee Day. All of these are opportunities to get people to complete the census. They're opportunities to, to tell people about what is going on. And if you are part of the Census, Colorado Census listserv and newsletter system, you will be getting an announcement for this tomorrow. And we encourage people to take some of the materials, use their networks, and build up responses so that we have a big bump as we're getting into July. So.
Oh, well, perfect. Thank you, Adam.
Finally, this is me. So please, if you have any questions, get in touch with us. Send me an email. We're not in our office right now because of COVID, and also because of issues that happened over the past week. The best way to get in touch with us is via email, and we certainly look forward to helping you all and getting your questions answered.
Perfect. Thank you, Adam. So yes, we are a little bit over time. Just wanted to say, want to thank Adam Bickford again and the Department of Local Affairs for their support and generosity, and for participating in today's Facebook Live event. This video will be available to everybody, along with other information on the center's website at caahealth.org. So feel free to check us out. Next week, our Facebook Live Lunch and Learn will focus on youth, keeping them healthy mentally and physically. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day, everyone.